gives you the... Hello, we are welcoming you to join us for free training today at 22 at noon, brought to you by the Greater Cheyenne Chamber of Commerce and PTAC. We have Rich Lyles and Andy Lewis here with us today, and we are thankful for them. And so GBSD is coming to town. With that, a lot of opportunities, which there are already opportunities for procurement of government contracts. But some of our small businesses don't know exactly what is entailed in that. So we have partnered with PTAC and Rich, and they are going to give us some training, and we'll be bringing multiple weeks with different topics. You can check that out on our website. And now I'm going to introduce you to Rich. Hello, Rich, and thank you for being here today. And tell us a little bit about Intro to Government Contracting.
All right, well, I just want to kind of start off today by saying we're going to be doing a series of these, as a number of you know. This is going to be the first of 8, and then we're going to follow that up with 8 more additional sessions that are going to be web-based. That will be, well, some will be live training, some will be web-based, and they will be much more in-depth. So basically, in about 21 minutes here that I have, I'm just going to kind of go over the basics, and then I just want everybody to know there's going to be a follow-up later on that where we will go into these topics a lot more in depth. So basically, with government contracting, one of the very first things that I'd like to tell everybody is kind of what the government actually buy, basically how much. And if you break that down within between 2 categories, the federal government and then all the state and local governments combined, last year that we have data for, which would be fiscal year 2017, the federal government spent just a little bit over $500 billion on goods and services. The number closer to about $510 billion. Now, that makes them the single largest customer on the entire planet. So, at nearly $500 billion. Now, if you take a look at state and local governments, and that includes cities, counties, states, of course, school districts, institutes of higher education, in the public sector. You combine all of those together, that's a market in 2017 of nearly $1.4 trillion. Now, that's actually quite a bit of money. Now, those budgets are actually up a little bit higher this particular year, and they're so I wouldn't be surprised in 2018 to see the federal spending go to about $550 billion, and state and local go up approximately to about $1.6 trillion. So it's a $2 trillion plus market. So it really is huge. So basically, the first thing I would say to anybody who wants to get in the public sector is, number one, just do your research. Although it's true the federal government buys just about everything that there is, not every single agency buys every good and service. So you have to really kind of research and take a look at the agencies, the departments, the bureaus that actually purchase the good or service that your company will provide for them. The other thing is to take a look and see how they actually, those agencies actually make their purchases. And one thing I like to just give a brief summary of is the different purchasing thresholds. So this is specifically with the federal government. The federal government purchasing threshold can be broken down basically into 3 tiers. The first tier is called the micro purchase threshold, and that, for all practical purposes, is anything under $10,000. Generally speaking, those purchases are made with a credit card, and you actually don't have to be registered in any system. You can just do business kind of with them as long as you take credit cards, and it's really pretty easy and simple. It's fast. The next tier is the simplified acquisition, or SAP, simplified acquisition procedures, and that goes from the top of the micro purchase threshold of $10,000 up to, generally speaking, $250,000. Now, the $250,000, that's, I mean, there's some exceptions to that where it can actually be higher than that, but generally speaking, it's $250,000. The third tier is above $250,000, and that's basically full and open competition. The reason those tiers are kind of important is that because anything in the micro purchase realm under $10,000 is under anything under $10,000 is, generally speaking, full and open. Anybody can bid on it. Anything over $250,000 is the same way. It's that area in between the simplified acquisition procedures, the $10,000 to $250,000, that are set aside for basically small business and other socioeconomic designations within the federal government. So we have these thresholds, and one thing that I want to emphasize too is that that's for the federal government. You have to do some additional research when you're dealing with state and local governments. The reason being is that I'm just going to take the city of Cheyenne, for example. There's 4 basic thresholds that they have. Anything under $2,500 is not a formal bid, and they only need 1 quote. From $2,500 to just under $5,000, it's not formally bid either, and they only need 3 verbal quotes. From $5,000 up to $34,999, it's also not a formal requisition process, and they need 3 written quotes. Anything over $35,000, so $35,000 and above actually is a formal acquisition process. And keep in mind that's going to vary by entity to entity, from city to city, from county to county, and generally speaking from state to state. There are a handful of states that have very congruent purchasing rules, like Nevada, for example, has NRS 333 as the state rules, NRS 332 are the city rules, and every city municipality has to adhere to that. But that's really the exception to the rule. Most places have their own and have a lot more leeway as to what they will allow, or the leeway that they will allow the local purchasing authorities to set up their own rules, essentially. So another thing I wanted to quickly touch base on is in the world of federal contracting. So you've made the decision that you want to pursue public contracting, specifically with the federal government. One of the first things that you'd want to determine is, are you a small business? And the way you determine that is based on your primary NAICS codes, and that's NAICS, and it stands for North American Industry Classification Code. And the way, if you don't know what your NAICS code is, the way to find out is you can just do a Google search and type in 2017 NAICS, NAICS codes, Census Bureau, because the Census Bureau is the agency that maintains the NAICS code, and it should pull their page right up where the NAICS codes are located, and you can, it's a fairly user-friendly page. You can drill down within your industry, and or you can use a single keyword to search within the search button, and it should be able to tell you what your NAICS code. You should be able to find out what your NAICS code is. And the reason that's important is the Small Business Administration determines whether or not you're a small business based on that primary NAICS code that you have. And generally speaking, if you're in if you're a manufacturer, or if you're in the retail trade or wholesale trade, it's going to be based on the number of employees you have, and it'll range anywhere from 100 employees up to 1,500. And if you're in just about any other industry, it'll be based on your average 3 years revenue, and it can range from a low of 5.5 million, well, outside of agriculture for the most part 750,000, but it can range anywhere from 5.5 million up to 38.5 million, the vast majority being between 11 million and 38.5 million. So it just really depends on what it is. So a lot of people don't necessarily think of a company that has 1,400 employees, for example, as being small, but if your company manufactured automobile parts, aftermarket, you would be considered a small business by the U.S. government for the purposes of federal contracting. Now, the thing that's important to that also is that the federal government has a number of socioeconomic programs, and we're going to have a couple of events later on focusing just on the particulars of these socioeconomic programs. But basically, there's 6 specific socioeconomic programs, but there's really 7 classifications. And the 7 classifications are small business, and then you have woman-owned small business.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. Then economically disadvantaged woman-owned small business. And I'll take a quick aside here. Once again, just like with small business, someone's definition of economically disadvantaged is a lot different than the federal government's definition.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal government's definition, for all practical purposes, includes probably about the second standard deviation, so say about 96% of the U.S. public would fall under the that definition. So those are the first 3. The fourth socioeconomic classification is veteran-owned small business. The fifth one would be service-disabled veteran-owned small business. The sixth one would be the number 8, the letter A, which is 8A, the 8A program, which is for economically and socially disadvantaged businesses. And then the seventh one is called Hub Zone, and Hub is H-U-B, zone, all one word, and Hub stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. So those are the 7 designations, and what's important about that is that the federal government and any prime contractor that's a large business that has a federal contract that's equal to or greater than $700,000 is required to have goals every year for utilizing the business categories that I just spoke about. So, for example, the federal government and the large primes have to have a 23% goal for small business utilization. And for woman-owned and economically disadvantaged, and for 8A, those 3 socioeconomic designations, there is a 5% set aside. And then for service-disabled, veteran-owned small business, and for Hub Zone, there's a 3% set aside. And you notice I did not say veteran-owned small business. The reason being is that government-wide there is not a target or a goal for veteran-owned small businesses. However, if you're doing business specifically with the VA for certified veteran-owned small businesses, there is a 5% goal, and also with the VA there's a 10% goal if you're service disabled. So they vary just a little bit. So why is that important? Well, a number of reasons, and just tune into some of our later broadcasts to find out the particulars of those, because I will run out of time if I try to go through all of those right. I'd run out of time if I tried to go through one of those right now. So anyway, there's a lot of there is a lot of that information to actually cover. Now with subcontracting, that's something that you may also want to consider. The reason being is that with these socioeconomic designation in these programs, this is really targeted towards, for the most part, towards prime contracts, except if you're working with a large prime like Boeing or Northrop or whoever, CACI, CACI, whoever it may be. If you're working with them and they're still going to have these same goals that they have to do in the same percentages. So, you're looking at subcontracting opportunities, and the reason I bring up subcontracting is that unlike being a prime contractor where you have a whole different set of rules and responsibilities and a bunch of regulations that you have to adhere to, sometimes subcontracting can be a much more simpler process. It can mimic a lot more of the business-to-business that you're already used to if you're already doing business in the private sector but not yet in the public sector. So it tends to be a relatively easy transition. If you are working on federal projects, keep in mind that there are additional rules and regulations that will trickle down to subcontractors. Like in construction, you're still going to be looking at prevailing wage provisions, Davis-Bacon Act, stuff like that, certified payroll in many instances. So there will be some additional hoops that you'll have to jump through, but it's not nearly as stringent, so to speak, as if you have the prime contract. So it's a really good way to kind of get into the door. Also bear in mind that if you first want to jump into the public sector, that working with state and local governments can also be a nice entry level first or second step into this particular arena. The other reason it's good, especially if you're construction, for example, is if you yet to have experience in the public sector, getting experience on some of the smaller jobs and contracts with state and local government will give you that prior experience, that past performance experience that the federal government's looking for, and oftentimes the large primes are looking for as well. So it's a nice way to become a little more contract ready. So one of the questions I get quite often, we all get, Andy and I both get it, is in every PTAC around the country is, okay, well, this is great, how do I get started? And basically the very first thing that you'd want to do, once you've made a decision, done your research, and okay, public sectors, I want to jump into this either as a large part of my business or as start off with a small segment that I'm looking to possibly grow. The very first thing, if you don't already have it, is to get a DUNS number. And DUNS is DUNS, and it stands for Data Universal Numbering System. And the way you get a DUNS number, it's a 9-digit number, and the way you get it is you get it through Dun & Bradstreet. And their website address is D as in David, N as in Nancy, B as in boy.com, so just dnb.com. And if you're getting a DUNS number for the purpose of registering in a federal database or doing business with the federal government, you will get the DUNS number for free. It does not cost you a penny. So if you see any company that comes around and says, we want to charge you $200 or $300 or $400 to get a DUNS number for you, saying, oh, that's okay, I can get it for free. We're good. And believe me, once you register in SAM, you'll get some notifications from companies that will be willing to do a lot of stuff for you, and they'll be willing to charge you quite a bit of money. But virtually everything you can do yourself for free, and if not, we here at the PTAC are certainly here to help you with that process, and we don't charge anything. We're
free.
Gratis, 100%. So anyway, so you get the DUNS number, and the whole reason you have to get the DUNS number is because you're going to need that first before you can register in the federal government's database. So even before we get to there, the second step is to go into the Census Bureau's website. If you don't already know what your primary NAICS code is, go into the Census Bureau and find your primary NAICS code. And you're not limited to just one. I mean, you're limited to one primary NAICS code, but your business might actually have more than one NAICS code that's applicable to it. So you want to try to find all the ones that are applicable and then determine which one's your primary one, because that primary one that you're going to enter into the government's database is what they're going to use to determine the size standard to see whether you're a small business or not. So once you have your DUNS number, you have to wait at least 24 hours and then determine your NAICS code, and then you can register in what's called SAM. It's the federal government's database, and SAM stands for the System for Award Management, so SAM. And that's just that. The website for that is, for right now at least, is sam.gov. There's a whole bunch of other, if you do a Google search, there's a whole bunch of other places that will pop up, sam.org, sam.com, sam.whatever. The only one that you want to really go into is sam.gov. It's the only one that is free of charge, and it's the one where you need to register within anyway. So you go into SAM, and you're going to need basically three pieces of information. You're going to need to know your DUNS number, which you'll have with you. You're going to need to have your NAICS codes, which you've already gotten by going to the Census Bureau's website. And then you're going to need to know your banking account information, specifically your checking account number and your routing number for your bank. And the reason you're going to need that is you're going to need to put that information into SAM. And the whole reason for this is the DFAS, another acronym. Everything in the public sector of government is kind of is alphabet soup. DFAS, Defense Finance Accounting System. They are the ones that are actually going to use that information to make a payment to you when we win a contract and then perform on that contract. Now it's time to get paid. You're going to submit your invoices through an electronic system, and then the federal government is going to run through their payment system, whichever one it happens to be, because there's different ones for Department of Defense and another one for civilian agencies. And when it comes time to pay you, they're going to use this information that you've entered into SAM, the System for Award Management, to send a wire transfer to your bank account. The days of the paper check for federal contracting purposes are long over. So anyway, you're going to need to know that information. Now, there's an awful lot to SAM. We could easily do an hour-and-a-half webinar just on registering in SAM. But most of the other information you're going to know right off the top of your head. Like you're going to know your address, you're going to know your phone number, you're going to know that sort of stuff. So it winds up being, that part of it's relatively easy. Navigating can be a little bit of a challenge, and there's some other follow-up stuff you have to do after you register in SAM, like send in a specific notarized letter to prove that you are the person who actually is the owner of the company and therefore have ownership and control over this particular record. So, but anyway, with that said, that's pretty much what you need to do. So once you're registered in SAM, you're pretty much good to go. And as far as federal contracting goes, you're pretty much taking the first step to be contract ready. Whether you're looking to bid on the large project that's coming up here at Francis Warren here in the next couple of years, or you're looking at any other opportunity that may be out there with the federal government, and you'll be in pretty good shape. So with that, if looks like I've got about a minute and a half here or so, and if there's any questions, I'll be happy to entertain any questions at this point, but that's pretty much it for this particular presentation. I'd just like to say a thank you to the Cheyenne Chamber for helping to host this morning and put together these. We're certainly happy to be part of this, and we're looking forward to the future ones that we will have with them to disseminate more information as the fall progresses into winter.
Yes, and thank you, Rich, very much for being here. Our upcoming topics, so next week on Tuesday at noon, they can join us again, Facebook Live on the Greater Cheyenne Chamber Facebook page, and our topic for next week is... Bonding, yes. So perhaps a company has been working at a certain level, but they want to increase that bonding capacity, and just how to do that, and then what increased work opportunities that may present for them. Is that next week?
That is next week.
Okay, excellent. Well, if you need more information on acronyms and on the other introductory information that Rich shared with us today, then please go to our website, gbsdbound.com. Also has a direct link to Rich and his team. If you click under consultant, and you will be switched right over to Rich and his team. There's also a list of these codes that are there and the stages that you need to get through for your business and upcoming topics as well. So thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you, Rich and Andy, very much for being here and for your support. And how can people, do you want to share just some contact information for yourself there, Rich?
Sure. Phone number for me, my direct number is area code 307-343-0765, and my email address is rlyl, E as in Edward, S as in Sam, at uwyo.edu.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks again, and thank you to the business partners who are watching out there. Please share, because there's a lot of economic boom that's coming to Cheyenne with the GBSD and the modernization of our missile force. So thank you all so much.